Well, hello, everyone. It's Lisa Nirell, and welcome to the October 2nd Mindful Marketer live stream. It is a perfect fall day here in Virginia, USA, and we are going to be live streaming today from our multiple platforms with YouTube, LinkedIn Live, and Facebook Live. So thanks for being with us today on a Friday. I know a number of my corporate clients always tell me that this is their lunch and learn time on Fridays to relax for 40 minutes, bring their teams together, learn some new strategies during these COVID times, and really give themselves a boost of energy as they enter the weekend. So I'm glad you're with us. And remember, if you need to step out because you need to go get your tuna salad sandwich, we always provide replays at lisanirell.com/events. And also, as we get started, remember to tell us where you're from. We always like to know where people are joining in from. So let me tell you why we chose this topic and why David Allison will be joining us today. I'm so excited about this. I really am, because David has some incredible wisdom to share around why demographics are dead and why values will reign. And so today, I'll have to tell you, I just recently celebrated a birthday, okay? Let me just be fully transparent. I am getting very close to the big 6-0. And one of the things that I do is I free my life of things that don't give me joy and fulfillment. And one of the things that does not give me joy and fulfillment, and here's where my contrarian consulting mindset comes in, is when people try to make a living or exploit ageism. You know, it's been bothering me for a few years. And to me, you know, I'm almost 60, but I really feel more like 45. And I have a lot of friends and clients who feel the same way. So ageism is one of those beliefs that I just really believe needs to be retired. And that was no pun intended. So we're going to take your live questions today because there are certain values that we need to reconsider and some approaches that we need to reconsider. So let me, without further ado, tell you about our special guest today. David Allison is the founder of Value Graphics in beautiful, beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. He's a seasoned marketer. He has started companies. He has sold companies. He's also the author of We Are All the Same Age Now, and has done a very extensive study of human values and behaviors. I often find it hard to believe that he and his team have completed over 500,000 surveys. His passions also reflect a man of many layers. He loves time in the woods, in his cabin, art collection, and healthy living and nutrition. So without further ado, let me welcome you, David Allison.
I feel very welcome. Thanks for having me over.
Yeah, thank you. This is my studio, my global headquarters studio. Talk to us for a minute, David. I know you are also a bit of a contrarian. So I know we're going to be saying things today where I might be getting some controversial email feedback. But tell me, I read your bio, you've got a background in journalism.
Yeah.
And if you were to write a blog post or a book today, since you are a great writer and a great communicator, about the state of the brand known as the United States, what headline would you use?
Oh, wow. Like, way to start with a controversial subject. The state of the brand. If we were going to use typical branding and marketing speak, I'd say it's definitely a transitional brand at the moment. It's a brand that's going through some big changes in the way people think about it and the way it's perceived around the world. I think there's still some hope attached to the brand. I think there's still some potential attached to the brand, some redemption attached to the brand. But perhaps the brand is just a bit mired in old ways of thinking right now, which is a really nice segue into what my research has all been about. There's all kinds of things left over from the olden days about how we think about things, and we need to root them out everywhere, not just in the brand of the United States, but in our marketing habits and practices and the way we look at our target audiences. We can't bring legacy systems with us into the future if we're going to have a good, bold, happy future.
And let's hope one of the legacies that made us strong remains intact, known as the United States Constitution, and a return to something I miss immensely called civility. Those are, as a mindful marketer, that is my hope and dream, that if we can return to that, we will have had a successful year in spite of the scourge of COVID. By the way, we have visitors in saying hi. Greetings to Ginger from New York.
Ginger!
Ginger is a fabulous connector. Thank you, Ginger. So lots of interesting headlines there, but how does a person like you with a background in journalism end up being a data geek?
Oh, wow. That's a long and convoluted and sometimes dark and scary story, but let me give it a shot. So I did go to school for journalism, but it was kind of an excuse to get into advertising. I figured if I was going to be in the advertising industry, I should know how to write a story and I should know how to write a headline. I was a young kid. I didn't really realize that, those are two separate sides of the fence. But it gave me a good grounding in telling good, solid stories. And this was, 10 years ago when I was still in university. There's an age joke already, where we could graduate and go to work in an ad agency. And so I did. I went and worked in ad agencies, and then I worked in another ad agency, and I worked in another ad agency. And then I finally realized that this wasn't for me and that maybe I needed my own ad agency. And then I built that up over 10 years and sold it because I realized, no, that wasn't it either. It wasn't about owning it. It was just about ad agencies in general. It was not the place I needed to be. And it taught me a whole lot of really amazing things about how we approach, I guess, the journalism brain and the ad agency experience combined, brought together some sense of analysis of that situation where my journalism side was going, some of the stuff we're doing here doesn't really make a ton of sense. And the advertising side of me was supposed to be all about analytics and helping clients spend money and attract their customers and doing all those things. And so you put those two together, and it forced me to start looking deeply at some of the practices that are ingrained in the way we do business across Canada and the United States and around the world. And one of them, I call this revelation. I call it the story of Bob and Sally. And here's what Bob and Sally are all about. Bob and Sally is my nickname for every persona that was ever handed to me by a client that described their target audience using demographic and just a little bit of psychographic terms. And Bob and Sally lived in the suburbs, and they drove a minivan, and they had 2 kids. And these are what the kids did on the weekend. And Bob liked wearing clothes from J. Crew, and Sally, was a piano teacher, and blah, 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 all this stuff. But it was all very much based on demographics and psychographics. And then we'd go and spend $1 million and try and attract those people to the things that we were doing on behalf of our client. And I was involved in an industry very specifically that had a short life cycle. So we'd spend the money, and about a year later, we could see who bought. And
right. Very formulaic.
Yeah. And inevitably, we'd a year later go and see how we'd done. And we'd done well. Everything had sold. But Bob and Sally weren't there. So we just spent all this money talking to Bob and Sally, the 45-year-old couple from the suburbs with 2.3 children who were white-collar professionals and earned $150,000 household income a year, and they weren't there. So who were these people? Why were they here? We'd said something or done something that attracted them, but it wasn't what we thought, because Bob and Sally was who we thought we were chasing, and they just didn't show up. So that got me thinking, and when I sold the company, that's where I started diving into data to see if we couldn't figure that problem out.
Yeah. And how long ago did you start this journey to get to the point where you have now launched 500,000 surveys?
Well, it's been about 4.5, 5 years now. We have done 500,000 surveys around the world. And what we've measured is, very simply put, what does everybody on Earth care about? What are their values? And the reason we did this is very scientific. If you go and look at any of the human behavior sciences like psychology, psychiatry, sociology, neurology, they all disagree on all kinds of stuff, but they agree on one central tenet, which is that what we value, what we care about, drives all of our decisions 24/7, 365, right down to a biological level. Your prefrontal cortex uses your values to determine how to react to every piece of incoming data that your system receives. So we can't help it. As humans, we're hardwired to chase the stuff we care about and chase the stuff we value. So it occurred to me that if we could figure out what everybody cares about and turn that into a tool to profile target audiences, we'd have identified the magnets that people use, or what would make a particular product or service or brand absolutely magnetic for the target audience, because we know what they care about. And if you know what a bunch of people care about, why would you do anything except talk to them about what they care about? Like, why would you waste time on anything else?
Yeah. So what's it been like? And by the way, I know we're not going to be able to even scratch the surface today of the things that you've learned, but we're at least going to get into a couple of salient areas. I mentioned down here the banner people can go to for the Mindful Marketer live stream followers, and they can go download more information on this link that I just provided. So that's just an aside for everybody who's saying, I need to know more, but I had to go get my tuna salad sandwich.
So what have we learned? We've learned basically that the book title kind of sums it up nicely, that we're all the same age now. And in fact, we're all the same gender now. We're all the same income now. That these demographic categories that we believe tell us something useful about our target audiences and how to influence them and engage with them, they don't tell us anything about our target audiences at all. What I like to say is they describe what our target audiences are, but not who they are. Let me give you a couple stats to back that up. And one of my favorite lines is nobody acts their age anymore. And so let's start with age. If we look at, let's start with millennials. How many billions, maybe even trillions of dollars have we spent over the last 10 or 20 years trying to make stuff for millennials? Create campaigns, products, services. We have to redo the way we work, our human resource policies. Millennials are this special breed of people that need watering in a certain way. Well, across 436 different metrics in our data set, our global data set of what people care about, which includes values, but also wants and needs and expectations. So 436 different measurements. Millennials only agree with each other 15% of the time, which means 85% of the time they disagree on everything it means to be human. So how can you target a group of people who disagree with each other on everything 85% of the time? It's nonsensical. And by the way, all humans, regardless of age, gender, income, part of the world, anywhere in our whole data set, which is accurate for 180 countries, humans agree with each other 8% of the time. So that means millennials, they're only agreeing with each other 7% more than they'd agree with anybody else. So that's not a very good ROI if you're trying to chase millennials. And then the same kinds of numbers hold true for all those different demographic cohorts. You're talking about men or people who earn $100,000 a year. So you have millennial men who earn $100,000 a year. There's three groups of people who disagree on everything all the time. And you put them together and figure you've got your demographic description of your target audience. You've got a bigger group of people who don't resemble each other at all. And then we go and start spending money and think we know what to do.
And so I'm imagining that a corporation that hires you this in COVID times, they are looking to optimize every dollar they can. Optimizing and managing cash flow has become an art form and an important one right now during this incredible economic upheaval. So my guess is that you currently are helping a lot of organizations avoid making the mistake of overinvesting in approaching or targeting the wrong audiences.
That's
or
kind of
making the wrong assumptions.
The way I talk about it is that it's like a loaf of bread. We've been looking at our target audiences and slicing it up like this: gender, income, marital status, number of kids. And then we picked a few slices that we think make the most sense, and we run away and try and make a sandwich with that and think that we got it sorted out. But if you look for the shared values that are in your target audience that slice across that loaf of bread this way, you oftentimes find that you have a baguette and that you actually have a much broader audience than you thought possible. And the thread that unites them is what they care about, what their values are, not how old they are or how many kids they have.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point. Um, when I hear people say, well, this audience values family, is that almost too broad to even as a, because many of the people watching our live streams are either CEOs or chief marketing officers. So even saying, well, this person or this audience values family almost feels too broad.
Yeah.
How deep can you go with a client to make that even more relevant or specific?
Well, there's 56 core human values that people could possibly be chasing. That's it. There's only 56. So there's a certain number of them that we seem to see up at the top of the list for different target audiences over and over and over again. And certainly in many parts of the world and in many of the product categories we've worked in, everything from the United Nations to Wall Street hedge funds to stationary companies to packaged goods, all these different companies, family is one that starts coming to the top. But how you interpret family in each one of those contexts will also depend on the other values that come to the top of the list as being important for that target audience. So if it's family and personal growth and environmentalism that are driving every decision for your target audience in the stationary sector, then you're going to respond to that in a different way than those same three values showing up in a sports drink sector.
Yes.
So it's always contextual. Sociological data never gives you the answer, but it tells you what questions you should be focusing on. And so instead of a free-for-all going, well, strategically, let's go and do this and that, and we should try some, you just, no, it's these two or three things. Focus on there, get all your resources marshaled in this one direction because the data is saying that that's the stuff our audience cares about. Let's not worry what they don't care about. Even if we think it's super important, we put a new bell or whistle on our thing, it's not important to our audience. So let's talk to them about the stuff that is, connect those dots for them, and they'll be magnetically drawn to us.
Yes, I like that idea of being magnetically drawn. It sounds so much less manipulative. And that's the other reason I was really, really happy that Ginger introduced us, because you are very purpose-driven in your life. And I can tell, I can spot a mindful marketer from a mile away. So I would like to talk about that in a moment. But first, we have some questions from our audience. Okay. Jane joined us from Oregon, and we also have Drew joining us from DC. He says he's enjoying the session, and he says it's insightful to understand the emotional and the rational when it comes to values. He'd like to hear examples of values that are shared over time and maybe some that ebb and flow, and why. Okay. What have you been seeing?
There's a great example. There's a great question. Here's what's going on. Our values are formed in our late childhood and early adolescence based on how we're socialized, who's around us, who's influencing us at that time period in our lives. And once they're formed, they don't change. Your values are with you for life. We're not an octopus. We don't get to chop off a value and grow a new one later on. So people, particularly right now around COVID and around isolation and the pandemic, are asking, is that's got to be changing people's values? But no, it's not. It's changing their behaviors around their values. So if you cared about your family, if that was a core value for you, you brought up family, and it's one that is true for many people across the United States and North America, then right now you're doubling down on family. But if going into this, you didn't care at all about your family, it wasn't an important thing for you, you didn't suddenly start sitting at home fretting about your mom. That didn't happen. Your behaviors will have changed based on external things that are happening in the environment, but they're always rooted in the same set of values. Once this is all over, your attitudes towards family may just kind of calm back down again, but your family, as a value, is still going to be there, and you're still going to have that. And the folks who didn't have it are not going to have it. It hasn't changed values. It's changed the manifestations of those values. Our emotions, our feelings, our behaviors all come from our values.
Yes. Are there any particular, and I hope that was helpful, Drew, are there any particular industries that you think are leading the way in understanding values and shifting how they launch products, how they do their marketing, and even how they sell to their intended audiences?
I think there's a lot of industries who are trying. But the problem with values is they're a very sort of poetic thing to talk about. And many times we end up talking about values and using a way to determine values that I refer to as a 6 vice presidents and a box of donuts. So we sit in a boardroom with the 6 vice presidents and that box of donuts, and we say to ourselves, well, the values that we want to stand for here are collaboration and diversity and environmentalism. The shareholders will like that if we put that one on there. And then we take those values and we put them up on the wall behind the receptionist in those little standout aluminum letters on pegs that cost a lot of money. And then we love that. And we say, look, there's our values. We send a little memo around. The CEO writes something about it in our annual report. But it's not real. That's just the opinion of a few people. Even if you've gone and tested and asked a bunch of folks who work there and a bunch of your clients, do you think your family's important? Who's going to say no? Who's going to say no, my family's not important? Who's going to say that the real important thing to me is my status? My social ambition is the number one most important thing in my life. No one's going to say that out loud, even if it's true. So having a third-party verified database that you can go to and say, okay, for my audience, what's the truth? Then we're able to help these companies figure out how to navigate forward with these questions. I don't know their industries. They still need to come in and say, here's what we're going to do with that stuff, but we can tell them what to be focused on and what not to worry about anymore. So is there an industry out there that's doing this well? I think there's many that are trying very, very hard, and kudos to all of them because it's a good step in a good direction. But until you're using empirical data, it's a heartfelt approach. It's a really good, passionate idea, but now we can make it empirical, and that can make that heartfelt mindfulness even more powerful.
Yes. Well, that's good. David Allen James is sending us lots of comments and thumbs up for sharing some of these insights. My guess, and I shouldn't guess because we're talking about data here. I love data better than data. I have noticed that some hospitality brands have gotten this right. One of our seasoned CMOs in our CMO community, which we have been cultivating for 9 years, the marketing growth leaders, which we started as private peer groups. One of our founding members was the head of global marketing for Hilton, and they launched an entire brand around the behaviors and values of the intended audience, not the demographics. And prior to COVID, it was a successful launch of a brand. And so I wondered, other than hospitality, and even multifamily apartment dwellings, I'm seeing that there's a GID Windsor Communities is a very large real estate investment trust out of Boston, Massachusetts. And they just launched a beautiful new multifamily apartment in the New York City area. And it's all designed around wellness and fitness related lifestyles.
Let's talk about that, because I've done a whole bunch of work in the real estate sector. And so I've got some really good examples about that. Launching a building around health and wellness and fitness, that's all great. If you know for sure that the people who are going to be interested in that particular building are interested in health and fitness and wellness. I'll give you a great example. We worked with a company in Phoenix that was building a big skyscraper tower in downtown Phoenix. And this was, not a lot of them being built, but it had a swimming pool on the roof. And like every building in Phoenix, it's a billion degrees every summer there. So there's always a swimming pool somewhere on the back street or the side or the roof or whatever. And they all talk about their swimming pools in the same way, because it should be an incredible benefit for anybody who's thinking about coming to live there. They say it's a 24/7, 365 resort spa-like retreat with lounge chairs, and you're going to meet somebody, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, and there'll be drinks on Friday afternoon. And won't it be lovely to be on vacation all day, every day? So we did our profiling for this tower that this particular developer was putting together, and found out that the people, for whatever reason, we never really know why, the people who are attracted to this particular location saw themselves as being intensely creative. Now, creativity in our ecosystem doesn't necessarily mean painting, dancing, singing. It could be the chartered accountant who takes apart old clocks on the weekend, or my mom thinks she's super creative because she's got a garden. So that's her creative outlet. So as long as you think you're creative, That's cool with us because that's about how you approach the world. So all they did with this is they said, you know what, this isn't a swimming pool to nudge, nudge, wink, wink, meet somebody on the weekend. This is a place to come when you get stuck, when you need to get the endorphins flowing, when you need to swim a few laps and then go back and tackle that project that had you stymied a few minutes ago. You'll be refreshed and ready. This building is going to make you more creative than you've ever been before.
Is that what they said, essentially?
Yep.
What happened and how long ago did they launch that?
What happened is the building leased out. They've got a bunch of happy folks living in there. It was a rental building, so I haven't checked in with them recently, but the profile of people who showed up fit the profile. A lot of creative folks showed up. And what that means long term is that the churn on that building will be lower. There won't be as many people moving in and out, which is one of the worst things for when you own an asset, a rental building. You don't want people coming and going and coming and going. Ideally, you want everybody to move in and stay there for the rest of their lives, because then there's less wear and tear on the building. It's also expensive to try and attract new tenants into a rental building.
Especially during COVID.
Yeah, exactly. So the more you can appeal to a particular value set, and it's not an activity set. This wasn't about people who want to do creative things. This is about people who saw themselves as being creative, and they wanted to be in a building that honored the fact that they were creative people. And so all the amenities in that building ended up being designed around creativity.
Sounds like my kind of place.
Yeah, I want to live there.
I think my boyfriend would love it there. He's a songwriter and an artist and studies illustration, so he would probably thrive in that environment.
Well, you know what we learned? We learned that it just reinforced everything that our work is about. People of all ages came. People who, some were single, some were married. They had suites in there for downsizing boomers who wanted like big spaces, and they had small spaces for, it's near a campus, so small spaces for younger folks to who were starting out and didn't have any roommates and didn't want any roommates. But there's a broad cross-section of people who saw themselves as being creative, and they were magnetically drawn to the building that said, we know who you are. We've made this just for you.
Yeah.
How could you resist that?
Yes, we hear you. We hear you.
We see you.
We see you. You know, one of the speakers that we had at our annual CMOs Leading Innovation Conference was Leon Logothetis, who just finished his second season with Netflix. He has a series of programs called the Kindness Diaries. And part of the way he touches so many thousands, if not millions of lives now through his programs and his books is just recognizing that people see, you know, we see you, we recognize you. And sometimes that's all people need, especially now.
Yeah.
I want to answer another question from, and this is again, the joy of technology. I don't know who this is, so I'm going to ask you, tell us in the chat box your name or where you're from, because we never know specifically without your telling us. They'd like to know, of those 56 company values, David, are there categories? Distinct categories to maybe put them into smaller buckets?
I hear that's a good question. So let me tell you a little bit about those 56. First off, if you go and you look at the World Values Index or the Bhutan Gross Domestic Happiness Index or other proven social science tools, they tend to agree on a list of about 40 core human values. Well, we've done the most extensive study of human values on the planet. And in doing so, we ended up finding things that qualified as values that no one else had seen before. So that's how we got to 56. This is the largest list that anyone in the world of sociology will have ever pointed to before. There are some that are kind of similar. One cluster that we see in every profile, business to business, business to consumer, regardless of the sector. This category shows up. We call them the togetherness values. And these are different ways that we want to be with each other. So there's 5 of them. There's family, there's community, there's belonging, there's friendships, and there's relationships. And they all have slightly different meanings, but they're all, you can almost think of them as a scale. A relationship person, for example, they thrive, and what they need is a whole lot of In a business-to-business setting, that would be networking. In a personal setting, I always tell the story about Irma, who's the woman at the cashier at the grocery store across from where I live. And I always try and get in Irma's line when I'm checking out of the grocery store because I know her name and she knows mine, and we tell a joke. And she's not my friend. She's not my family. She's not coming over for dinner. But I'd sure miss Irma if she's gone one day because I have got a cool little relationship with Irma. So there's 5 different ways we like being with each other. And here's a beautiful, hopeful thing. Every single profile we've done, hundreds of them in dozens and dozens of industries, for-profit, not-for-profit, B2B, B2C, doesn't matter. There's always ways that we want to be with each other that show up somewhere near the top of every group of people that we end up profiling. So I think that right now, while we're struggling with isolation, while we're thinking about the subject of how long do we want to work from home, while we're thinking about when do we get to expand our bubble and actually just hug whoever we want to again, knowing that as humans, it's inevitable that that's the direction we will swing back to, because our values dictate everything we do, and our values are saying we want to be with each other, and they're saying that in a very loud and clear way.
I also believe, I know it's going to be getting chilly up there in Vancouver, and we're going to be getting some winter here in Virginia. People will want to be out and maintain some kind of social connection as it gets darker and colder outside. So we need to figure this out.
Yeah.
We need to figure this out. I want to find the company that manufactures those big plastic bubbles that you can, and you
like those big like those big gerbil bubble things.
Yeah, I want a big bubble. I can go outside and I can get people to kiss the bubble.
And when you do that, I will come and bring a camera, because that would be worth watching.
Well, at my age, believe me, nothing embarrasses me anymore. Nothing at all.
Love it.
And we have also a thank you coming in from Axel in Washington, D.C. So Axel says thank you for answering his questions. We only have about 5 more minutes left, David. I'd love to find out from you more also about your values, because we like to know about the person behind the data, or the person behind the data. You have, one of your values caused you to create a Robin Hood business model.
Yeah.
What is that, and what core values does that amplify for you?
It's a hard thing for me to talk about, and I'm going to try and do it quickly, because I also want to tell people how they can find out the values of their audience before we end today, because you don't have to hire me to do this. There's free ways to do it, and I want to share those. So for me, the deeper I got into understanding what everybody on the planet actually cares about, and how important that is to all of us, not just from a business perspective, but when you think about the mass power we have now with this data tool to engage groups of people and get them to do things, and all the problems that we're having all over the world right now. Large groups of people need to be influenced and engaged and get to change their behaviors and change the way they think about things. One quick example, we're throwing a dump truck a minute of single-use plastics into the ocean. And we now have the information in this data set to tell all the groups in the world who are trying to get people to rethink the use of single-use plastics what they need to say to be magnetic with that message. So I want them to have this data, and I want them to have it for free, because that's a problem that I can help, my little database can help move the needle on things like this.
I'll just put the link there for everybody, just in case they need it. Would that be the right place for them to go?
Where? Sorry, what are we talking about?
Oh, valuegraphics.online.
Yes,
/mindful.
Yes, that's a great, just an overview document to help people think about this differently. We're working with the UN right now on their program to buy enough mosquito nets so that families can sleep under mosquito nets and not get bit by malaria-borne mosquitoes. And we're doing that for them on a pro bono basis. And we're doing the Robinhood strategy is we charge our corporate clients to help them understand their audiences. And then we use that money to give it away to not-for-profits who are doing big global humanitarian things. And that's what gets me up out of bed in the morning. I love helping my corporate clients, but even more, I love knowing that I'm actually, as corny as it sounds, helping to make the world a better place too. So that's that. But let me quickly finish with how can you do this without hiring me? Of course, you should hire me. But if you don't want to hire me, there's two other ways you can do this. First one is free, and that's just to start asking your customers the right questions. Every single poll that we send out, we tend to say, how old are you? How are your gender? How much money do you make? How much do you like my product? Have you bought a lot of my product? Will you buy more of my product next week? And we ask all those kinds of questions, and then we try and figure out what to do with our target audience based on that stuff. And instead, just ask them what's on their mind. Train your frontline sales teams to say, so what are you thinking about these days? What's the last thing on your mind before you go to bed at night and the first thing when you wake up in the morning? Nothing to do with your product. You'll start to see signals. You'll start to see patterns come out, and you'll go, wow, the people who are our patrons, our fans, the people who are buying things from us, they care about this because that's what they're thinking about. So we need to figure out how to help them with that. So that's the free way. The second way costs you $16. A little bit more precise. In my book, which we talked about, we are all the same age now. There it is, my beat up old copy. There's a quiz, a 10-question quiz. And you can use that quiz, put it on SurveyMonkey, whatever tool you'd like, get as many people as you can to fill out the quiz, quick 10 questions, and it'll point you to one of the chapters in the book that talks about one of the top 10 value graphic archetypes across the country. So you at least have, in a very big, broad way, this batch of information about your group, your audience is most like chapter 7. So there's some information for you about what they're all about. So there's two, a free way and a $16 way that you can start to use values and values thinking and values-based customer insights with the work you're doing, the products and the services and the brands and the messages you're thinking about right now.
Well, that's an excellent way to get started. And of course, if any of you are planning any virtual events in the coming months or a live event in 2021, which we are all aiming for, a healthier planet, I've heard great things about your keynotes as well, and ways you can inspire broader audiences to save the planet. And Latif from Virginia, by the way, said, great stuff. We need more social science in business.
Hallelujah.
Amen. Amen to that. And also another one from Dima. Dima, I'd love to know where you're from. Apparently your talk on value graphics inspired her, or I believe Dima is a woman, hope I got that right, to redesign the way they teach their classes.
I know Dima. Dima's from, don't get mad at me, Dima, if I get it wrong. You're from Abu Dhabi, not Dubai. You're from Abu Dhabi. And I spoke to a group of educators around the world at one point, and Dima was instrumental in putting that online talk together. And we talked about how values are a great way to inspire your students and to be resilient as a teacher yourself. And I'm so glad to hear that it landed and it's impacted the way you're teaching. So fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, yes, Dima, thank you. And that's what I absolutely love about the live streams. This was, my values under the umbrella of family is community. So because I started communities 9 years ago, I care deeply about where I live and the people here in my community. And I feel very held and loved where I live and I work and I play. And what I love about these live streams, David, is that the community is much bigger now. Yeah. And I never really knew 3 months ago when I started these, whether A, I would enjoy them, and B, whether people would care. Would people care? Would they show up and actually?
Anybody going to come to my party?
Yeah. And now we have DC and Dima from Dubai. She's from Dubai.
Hi, sorry.
And we are able to help more people in a caring way. And I really love that. So I want to say, David, to close that it was no accident that we met. It was no accident that we were able to put this together on short notice today. And anything we can do as we go forward, we are going to continue to share your wisdom for many months to come. As long as people sign up here, they'll be getting our updates and replays, and we'll make sure that the word continues to get out.
Thank you. Thank you. It's hugely important to me. I really appreciate it.
Yes. So everyone, I wish we had those little emojis. If everybody could, give a big thumbs up today to David Allison of Value Graphics for joining us from Canada, and wishing you the best as we approach the holiday season, David.
You too. Thank you so much for having me.